A woman and her infant grandchild were in the doctor's office for the baby's first checkup. After a thorough examination, the doctor weighed the baby and frowned slightly. "Is this baby breastfed or bottle-fed?" he asked. "Breastfed," the woman replied. I see," said the doctor. "Well, let's check you out, just to be sure." Confused but cooperative, the woman stripped down to her waist as instructed. The doctor began his exam, carefully pinching, pressing, kneading, and rubbing her breasts for several minutes. After completing his detailed inspection, he stepped back with a serious look and said, "No wonder this baby is underweight. You're not producing any milk at all." "Well, of course not," the woman said with a laugh. "I'm his grandma. But boy, am I glad I came to this appointment." Ned and his buddy Carl decided to go golfing in Scotland, so they packed up Ned's minivan and headed north. After a few hours on the road, a blizzard hit and they had to pull over. They knocked on the door of a nearby farmhouse, and an attractive woman answered. "Would it be possible for us to stay the night?" Ned asked. "The weather's terrible and we could really use a place to rest." She hesitated for a moment and then explained, "I've recently been widowed and I live here all alone. I'm worried what the neighbors might think if I let you stay inside." "Don't worry," Ned reassured her. "We'll sleep in the barn, and if the weather clears, we'll be gone first thing in the morning." The woman agreed, and the two men settled into the barn for the night. The next morning, the storm had passed, and they continued on their journey. Fast forward 2 years. Out of the blue, Ned received a letter from an attorney. It took him a moment to figure out who it was from, but he eventually realized it was the lawyer of that widow they'd met in Scotland. He went to Carl's house and asked, "Hey, Carl, do you remember the farm where we stayed during that golf trip in Scotland?" "Of course I do," Carl said. "Well, did you, happen to visit the widow at her house in the middle of the night?" Ned asked, a bit concerned. Carl flushed and sheepishly admitted, "Yeah, I did. I'm sorry, I panicked. I didn't know what to do, so I gave her a fake name. And, it was yours." Ned's eyes widened. "And did you by chance tell her I was a wealthy man?" Carl's face went even redder. "I'm really sorry, Ned. Why do you ask?" "Because she just died and left me everything," Ned said with a grin. Jack, 92, and Jill, 89, from Nelson, are excited about their decision to get married. On their way to discuss the details of their wedding, they pass a chemist shop. Jack suggests they pop in to check things out. Jack approaches the pharmacist behind the counter and asks, "Are you the owner?" The pharmacist nods. "Yes, I am." Jack smiles and says, "Well, we're about to get married, and we were wondering if you sell heart medication." "Of course," replies the pharmacist. "Medicine for circulation?" Jack continues. "All kinds," says the pharmacist. "Rheumatism medicine?" Jack asks. "Definitely," comes the reply. "What about suppositories?" Jack goes on. "You bet," the pharmacist says. "Memory aids, arthritis treatments, and stuff for Alzheimer's?" Jack presses. "We've got it all," the pharmacist reassures him. "Vitamins, sleeping pills, and Parkinson's treatments?" Jack asks. "Absolutely," says the pharmacist, starting to wonder where this is going. "Anything for heartburn and indigestion?" Jack inquires. "We have that too," the pharmacist replies, a bit puzzled. "Adult incontinence pants?" Jack asks. "Sure," the pharmacist answers. "But why all these questions?" Jack beams and says, "We'd like to use your store for our wedding registry." In a small-town courtroom, the prosecuting attorney, a young, cocky lawyer, called his first witness to the stand, an elderly, grandmotherly woman named Mrs. Jones. He approached her confidently and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know me?" She smiled warmly and replied, "Oh, yes, Mr. Williams. I've known you since you were a little boy. And I have to say, you've been a huge disappointment. You lie, you cheat on your wife, and you're always talking behind people's backs. You like to act like a big shot, but truth be told, you'll never be anything more than a 2-bit paper pusher. Yes, I know you." The lawyer was stunned, unsure how to recover. So, trying to salvage the situation, he pointed across the room and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know the defense attorney?" She nodded again. "Why, yes, I do. I've known Mr. Bradley since he was a young man, too. And let me tell you, he's lazy, bigoted, and has a drinking problem. He's never been able to form a meaningful relationship, and his law practice is one of the worst in the state. Oh, and don't get me started on his affairs. He cheated on his wife with 3 different women. One of them was even your wife. Yes, I know him. The defense attorney looked like he was about to collapse. The judge, now thoroughly concerned, called both lawyers to the bench and whispered in a low voice, "If either of you asks her if she knows me, I'm sending both of you to the electric chair." If you're a senior, you'll appreciate this one. If you deal with seniors, it might help you understand them better. And if you're not a senior yet, well, God willing, someday you will be. The $2.99 special. We went out for breakfast at a restaurant where the seniors special was 2 eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast for $2.99. Sounds good, my wife said, but I don't want the eggs. Well, I'll have to charge you $3.49 then, because you're ordering a la carte, the waitress informed her. You mean I have to pay for not taking the eggs? My wife asked incredulously. Yes, the waitress said, nodding firmly. Okay then, my wife said, I'll take the special after all. The waitress, still smiling, asked, How would you like your eggs? Raw and in the shell, my wife replied. She took the eggs home and baked a cake. A blonde woman had a little accident and went to the hospital for a checkup. As she arrived, a male doctor approached her and said, Could you please lower your pants? The blonde woman smirked and replied, I'll lower them, but only on one condition. The doctor, taken aback, asked, What do you mean, one condition? With a grin, the blonde responded, If I lower them, then I won't be paying for the treatment. At St. Peter's Catholic Church, they have weekly marriage seminars for husbands. During last week's session, the priest asked Giuseppe, who was approaching his 50th wedding anniversary, to share some wisdom on how he had managed to stay married to the same woman all these years. Giuseppe stood up and with a grin said, Well, I tried to treat her nice, spend money on her, but the best thing I did was take her to Italy for our 25th anniversary. The priest, deeply impressed, replied, Giuseppe, you are an inspiration to all the husbands here. What are you planning for your wife on your 50th anniversary? Giuseppe proudly answered, I'm going to pick her up. An elderly woman walked into a store that sold jade and asked for 7 kilograms of potatoes. The store owner was more than happy to help and began packing the potatoes. However, the woman stopped him and requested that each potato be wrapped individually. The man complied and asked if there was anything else she needed. The woman then asked for 4 kilograms of onions, also wrapped individually. The store owner did as requested, his patience thinning, and asked again if she needed anything else. Yes, she said. 7 kilograms of carrots and wrapped individually, please. At this point, the owner, now visibly frustrated, muttered, Let me guess, you want them wrapped individually, too. Oh, that would be wonderful, the woman replied cheerfully. The shopkeeper packed her items and handed her the bag. Just before she left, she pointed at the crates behind the counter and asked, What are in those crates? The shopkeeper flushed red and said, Madam, those are grapes, and they are not for sale. 3 older gentlemen sat down in the park for a conversation. The youngest one, who was 70, said, There's no worse age than 70. You always feel like you have to pee, and most of the time you try, and nothing comes out. The 80-year-old man chuckled and said, That's nothing. 80 is a much worse age. You can't even do your business properly anymore. You take laxatives and then sit on the toilet for hours waiting for something to happen. The oldest man, 90, smiled and said, Actually, 90 is the worst age of all. Do you have trouble peeing too? Asked the 70-year-old. Not really, said the 90-year-old. I pee every morning like clockwork at 6 a.m. Do you have trouble crapping? Asked the 80-year-old. Nope, said the 90-year-old. I do my business every day promptly at 6:30 a.m. The 70-year-old looked puzzled and said, Let me get this straight. You pee at 6 a.m. and crap at 6:30 a.m.? So, what's the problem? The 90-year-old smiled and replied, I don't get up until 7 o'clock.